The game has started, the players are on the field. Look, I'm talking about the special session of the Louisiana legislature. So look, I did what any right-minded person would do. I got the heck out of Baton Rouge and I came to Lafayette, met with Mayor-President Joel Robideaux. We're not talking about Boudin, we're not talking about Zydeco, we're talking legislative politics. And this guy knows. He was chairman of Ways and Means, the tax writing committee. He was Speaker Pro Tem of the House for 2 years. He knows the ins and outs. He's going to tell us a little bit about it. And if he knows anything, he knows about capital gains.
This episode was produced by LaPolitics.com and Ben Broussard Marketing and is sponsored by Cheniere Energy, America's largest LNG exporter, providing U.S. energy around the world and jobs to Louisiana.
Joel, thank you for having me here in Lafayette. I feel like Lafayette is home away from home.
That's good.
My wife and I used to come over here and go to the Blue Moon Saloon. You ever go run over there and listen to music?
Oh yeah, Falgout's a friend of mine, Mark Falgout, owns it. He's got a great business working over there.
It's one of those Louisiana gems. Nobody wants to hear us talk about music in Lafayette, though. They want to hear us probably talk about the legislative session, which as we sit here, the special session is convening. You were chairman of Ways and Means for 4 years. Prior to that, you were pro tem for 2 years. As you're starting to watch this process play out right now, as mayor-president, where does your mind go?
I just think back to dealing with the budget and a lot of the same issues that they're faced with now that, when we were faced with it, we hoped it was temporary and that it would start to work itself out and the economy would fix itself, but that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, that's one thing you didn't have to deal with as chairman, I think, is that temporary nature of these policies. And you go back and look at that history with Mike Foster and everybody else, once you get on that cycle of these temporary fixes, it's hard to get out of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, a permanent fix, makes all the sense in the world. It's just a lot harder to get the votes that you need for something permanent. And so, right towards the tail end is when the dip in the state collections happened. We had a couple of disasters which factored into that. And again, you think it's temporary and you say, look, if we can just tide ourselves over for another year or so, things will get better and start to pick up. And that just really hadn't happened since I've been gone.
Well, that position, which is now held by Neil Abramson, is really at the epicenter of tax talks in Baton Rouge. And it's got to be overwhelming because you're dealing with the Senate and trying to watch your back over there. You're dealing with the administration. You're dealing with your own body. Of all the elected positions that you've held, political positions, was that the most demanding?
Oh yeah, the Ways and Means is probably, and with all due respect to whoever's chairing finance and whoever's chairing appropriations, because they have to decide how the money's spent. But in years where there's a lack of revenue or a decrease from the previous years, any new revenue has to start on the House side, and it's going to start in the Ways and Means Committee, or it's going to die in the Ways and Means Committee.
Right.
But that's the place where it happens, and you've got folks from the Senate pushing you to send us something, just get us something to work with, and it's a lot easier to talk about than it is to actually do.
Well, I think it puts the chairman in a position to make some big moves, and the chairman of that committee can really alter the course of a session very quickly. And what comes to mind to me is when Governor Jindal had his tax plan last term, he ended up parking it. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting term. I'd always heard that you played a very big role in that, and I can remember around that time a Lafayette publication had wrote a story and then basically called you Jindal's boy, that you're carrying his water. But as I understand it, and I don't know if you've ever talked about this publicly, but you're a big reason why he parked that plan last term.
I like how you're bringing that up, but I had effectively buried that in my head, and so there's a lot of difficult decisions that have to be made, and so as chairman of Ways and Means, you're in the position where you're either going to put your colleagues in the position to have to make some very difficult votes for something that has no chance of passing, or make the difficult decision to get out front and kind of do the heavy lifting on behalf of the body so that they're not put in that position. And look, if something has a chance of passing, then I do think as a chairman, you have that obligation to give it a fair hearing and let the body debate it and let the chips fall where they may. But once the body has made it clear that that they're not passing something like a tax plan, that they have no interest in getting that passed, and now you're just putting people on the record just to either, have them get punished or whatever else happens in the politics of Louisiana, then you got to consider it. And in Jindal's case, there was a lot of conversation going around about, everything that he was doing was as it, would benefit his political aspirations for his presidential run. And people just weren't interested in doing something that was going to jeopardize the state for the next 20 years as it related to the budget. And so a lot of difficult decisions had to be made.
This term we've seen Ways and Means use a tool that they have in their tool chest, which is to send bills to the floor without any action. Mm-hmm. What are the pluses and minuses of doing that with tax policy?
Yeah, there's two schools of thought as it relates to that maneuver. One is some of these issues are important enough that they deserve a debate. The full body should have an opportunity to weigh in. And so you can say, look, I don't think it's coming out of committee. We're not going to vote on it. That way we'd have two votes on it. Let's just bring it to the floor and everybody can have this discussion and debate, and everybody has their one vote on it. As opposed to the other school of thought is that the committees are set up because that's where the public has the most input. They can actually be there in person in the committee hearings to engage in the debate, face to face, 15 feet from their legislators and their elected representatives. And so the committee should do that work and then make their decisions based on that really, publicly involved process. And if it comes out, it comes out and goes to the floor, great. If it dies in committee, it dies in committee because of the debate that was held. And so there's no right answer. And I think, if you use it, it should be used, that maneuver should be used as sparingly as possible.
When you were chairman of the tax writing committee, you were dealing with John Alario in the Senate, trying to look out for the members in your own body. You were dealing with Governor Jindal. And I know it's probably a different answer depending on the personality, because you came into the legislature as an independent, and your political brand kind of continued on that path as an independent, although you switched to Republican. What's the key to making that position work?
Ultimately, when you're looking at somebody, whether it be someone in the House, someone in the Senate, someone on the governor's staff, there has to be some level of trust involved in that relationship. You have to, I think, always approach the conversations, with honesty as the base level, and then, disagree where you're going to disagree and try to figure out a strategy to move stuff forward. But when people start to not believe what comes out of each other's mouths, then you really just hit stalemate.
Well, to your credit, you were the 2013 gentleman of the House, so you had that reputation in the lower chamber. But you also had the nickname of 007 among some of your colleagues. I guess that suggests that it's almost like a chess game as well, huh?
Well, it's definitely a chess game, and so oftentimes it's what you don't say, which, lets people's imagination maybe run a little wild with nicknames. But, it's
a pretty cool nickname.
He said, no, look, I've been called worse than 007. I agree. But, at the end of the day, people want to know that you're negotiating in good faith, that ultimately when you ask them to make a vote, and here's what you think's going to happen as a result and where we're going to end up, they have to believe that. And so sometimes the process can get a little ugly behind the closed doors when, you're meeting and you're, as a House member, it's the Appropriations, Ways and Means, the Speaker, maybe a handful of one or two others, and you're speaking on behalf of 105 elected officials from all across the state. And so those other individuals, have to believe in you that you're leading them down the right path.
One big difference between your term as chair of Ways and Means and this term on that committee is that you have some committee members who are directly involved in this push for a constitutional convention. This upcoming regular session, we could see as many as 6 or 7 bills on both sides of Memorial Hall. What do you think? Is it time to pop the hood on that 1974 charter?
It's probably time to pop it. Whether or not it's done in a more limited fashion is probably a little bit more palatable, because there's so much in the Constitution.
It's a scary idea of just popping the hood and having a free-for-all.
Well, I mean, you can look to what's happening in our legislative sessions and see that, you pop open the hood and you may end up not coming to consensus. And so, you just once again wasted, a lot of time and effort and money for something that's not going to come to fruition. So something targeted, something that I think the vast majority of the public agrees on, probably limited. I think it's about that time. I mean, now, can you come to a consensus? That's the big question. And then who are the delegates at the convention? I mean, I don't even know if the legislature is in a position, relationship-wise, right now to even agree on who those delegates would be. Because if it's just going to be the legislative elected officials, well, then it's like, well, if they can't agree in session, what's going to be different? But then if you're opening it up to where the delegates are going to come from outside of the legislators, well, that I don't know if the legislators are in love with that prospect either, because
they got to decide if they're going to run or not.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've got a whole new, group of folks that maybe then interested in running for the legislative seat if they're able to actually go and accomplish something in a constitutional convention. So anyway, a lot of politics that go into whether or not the legislature would even vote to go down that path, and who would be the delegates.
Yeah. So there's a mixed approach coming in the regular session where you have some senators calling for a full constitutional convention, and then you have some House members and some others who are looking for a limited. What's different this go around is that we're seeing a few bills being drafted that would pull in the local government article from the Constitution. That's a big sticking point every year, is funding for local government. Does that idea give you a little heartburn or pause?
Well, anyone that doesn't have some heartburn over the possibilities of a constitutional convention are probably just being naive.
They're not doing it right.
Yeah, I mean, so if the locals are in there, certainly, then yeah, I mean, there's some heartburn, but I know that there's some fixes that could be made. And, I'm a firm believer. I was finished with my 12 years at the Capitol, and proud of what I was able to accomplish and what I was able to do. But I decided to come back to the local level because I believe that's where you can make the most effective change, and you can do things that really are much more difficult each, level up, state, federal. But at local, you can really make some differences for the people that you represent. And so, yeah, I'd have some heartburn. I'd be watching it close, but I know there's some things that can be fixed. Lafayette's a little unique in that we're a home rule charter, as other places in the state. So I'd be watching, the authority that's granted to home rule charters more closely than any other piece of that, and to make sure that those protections stay in place and that autonomy stays in place. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. I still think it's a heavy lift, because I don't even know if they could agree on how the delegates are selected, much less what would be covered in a constitutional convention.
That's going to be a key piece to it. So that is your gig now. You're mayor-president. So you're called mayor inside the city limits of Lafayette, and when you go outside, you demand to be called president?
No.
President Robideaux?
No. Joel's good for me. That works.
One of the early hallmarks of your first term seems to be this approach to regionalism. I know there's some federal money that came down for the flooding where, as I understand it, the parish had a choice to go at it alone or to team up with surrounding parishes, and y'all chose the latter. Is that something we're going to see more from you on?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I believe that regionally, the Acadiana region, the more we can do regionally, the better it benefits all of us. You know, if my neighboring parishes do well from an economic standpoint, I believe Lafayette benefits from that. As it related to the flood money, the hazardous mitigation money, we each had a choice to say, all right, give me my money and I'm gonna fix what I can fix in Lafayette Parish and St. Martin and Vermilion and Iberia and St. Landry Parish and some of the others that surround us. And but we'd just been chipping away at, you know, each doing our own thing, and really are we solving a much bigger problem, which is our regional watershed and the flooding from a regional perspective, because the water certainly could care less what parish it's in. It's going where it's going. And I have to give credit to Guy Cormier that kind of spearheaded the regional effort for us. Now, they understood that Lafayette was taking the biggest political risk because the biggest piece of our pie would have been in Lafayette. But if I got my piece of the pie and did it in Lafayette, but what Guy did, just sent more water my way without any concern of what impact it has on Lafayette and St. Landry, and everybody did the same, then did I really do Lafayette, you know, did I do the best job that I could for Lafayette? So we agreed to do it and look at it from a regional perspective and said, look, what regional impact does this flood project have? And ultimately, a lot of that water is going to flow through Lafayette and through Vermilion. And so we approached it, all the parish presidents got together and approached it from a regional perspective, and we decided to pool our money together and approach it that way. And I think ultimately the state would be happy if everybody chose to approach their flooding and their drainage from a regional perspective, because that's really the smartest way to handle the flooding issue. And ultimately, if there's any more money that's going to make its way down, our plans are to continue to look at it from a regional perspective. And I hope you know, that puts us first in line for any additional funds. I hope that the feds look at us and say, you know what, that's the way you should do it. And if you're willing to do it that way, then there'll be a priority placed on funding that.
How was that transition for you, going from a strictly policymaking role to one of an administrator?
Yeah, that was probably the biggest difference between serving as a legislator, even though as Ways and Means you end up kind of, you know, getting into that executive role a little bit because you're having to work with the administration to make decisions that you bring back to the body. But it is much more policy driven as a legislator. For me it was. And now as the mayor-president, it's much more of you know, a management piece where I'm going to the council and saying, hey, we'd like to, you know, consider doing this. What are your thoughts? How should we present that? Is it something you can get behind? And so you're thinking more, you know, more big picture, and I've enjoyed it. It's a challenge, but I've certainly enjoyed it.
And the Home Rule Charter allows you to serve in this position for 3 consecutive terms?
Yeah, 3 4-year terms, so 12 years.
And do you, would you like to serve all 3 terms? Or would you like to start a rumor that you're going to run in the 3rd District this fall?
No, no rumors, no rumors. No, look, I'm people ask all the time if I enjoy the job. I love being mayor-president of Lafayette. It's a great community, great place to serve. And you know, as it stands now, I'm all in and committed to keeping this going for as long as the voters will have me.
Very good. Joel, thanks again for having us in Lafayette.
Enjoyed it.
Joel, thanks for making time for us today. I appreciate it.
Oh, glad to do it.
You don't miss it in Baton Rouge at all? Not one little bit?
Hell no.
Seriously, it's just between me and you.
Hey, Becky. Hey, hold my calls, please. Thank you. All right.
Everyone, if I could ask you to take your seats, we'll get started. We only have one bill on the agenda today. This is the House Committee on Ways and Means. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
He didn't even gavel in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Abramson?
Here.
Here. Representative
Ways to be mean.
Louie?
More like
Here.
ways not to beat Chairman
Representative
Robideaux.
Rodwater? Here.
That's it, y'all. That is episode 2 of Capital Gains. Mayor-President Joel Robideaux telling us about the ins and outs of the Ways and Means Committee. Look, you know he got his Yeti cooler, his Capital Gains cooler. But look, take a look at this. This is what is inside Governor John Bel Edwards' cooler. And look, we'll do it again next month. Until I see you again, keep your ethics and compliance, your war chest full, and your politics wild and ambitious.
Louisiana has a rich history of exporting to the world jazz, food, the laissez-faire way of life. Now, Louisiana has a new export, America's natural gas. Over the last 2 years, more than 200 cargoes of liquefied natural gas from Sabine Pass have been delivered to more than 24 countries on 5 continents. And each one can say, made in Louisiana. Chenier Sabine Pass LNG facility in Cameron Parish is the first large-scale facility of its kind in the United States. We are the largest single physical purchaser of natural gas in America, and we're only getting started. By 2020, Chenier expects to be a top 5 global supplier of LNG. In Louisiana, more energy exports means more jobs created here at home. Our Sabine Pass facility directly created more than 5,000 construction jobs at our peak and now supports 500 new permanent jobs and hundreds of permanent contractors. We've created more than $11 billion in economic activity and 25,000 indirect jobs since beginning construction in 2012. The exports from this one facility in Southwest Louisiana are expected to reduce the nation's trade deficit by $7 billion annually. We are proud to build and operate in Louisiana because this state reflects our values, and our commitment to our communities further embodies the true spirit of Louisiana. Chenier's success is Louisiana's success. It means more jobs, more U.S. natural gas sent around the world, and more opportunities for a better Louisiana.